Have you ever wondered why some objects exist outside of time? Not because they're frozen in it, but because they somehow manage to capture something essential about a particular moment, a specific convergence of intention, constraint, and genius that no amount of modern engineering can fully replicate or improve upon. The air-cooled Porsche 911 is one of those timeless objects, and the more distance we put between ourselves and the era that produced it, the more clearly that becomes true. To understand why the early 911 means what it means, you have to understand the world it was born into. It was 1963. Ferdinand Porsche's grandson, Butzi Porsche, drew a shape by hand, not in CAD, not through committee, not through market research and focus groups, and 17 rounds of stakeholder feedback. He drew a shape because it felt right, because it answered the question his grandfather had always asked: what does a car need to be? Not what does it need to have, what does it need to be? The answer was a rear-mounted flat-six engine, an arrangement that defied conventional engineering logic, and that every driving instructor since has warned students about a body shaped by function rather than fashion, and a cockpit built on the premise that the person inside it mattered, that they weren't a passenger being transported, but a driver being trusted. Porsche built 82 of them that first year. Nobody knew what they had. What followed over the next 3 decades was one of the most sustained evolutions in automotive history. Not reinvention, evolution. The air-cooled 911, from the original 901 through the 964, the 993, all the way to the last of the air-cooled lineage, grew incrementally, organically, the way a living thing grows. Each generation wider, more capable, more refined, but always recognizably itself. Always the same essential argument, made with slightly better tools. The 2-liter cars of the mid-60s were raw in a way that's almost impossible to describe to someone who hasn't driven one. Light, shockingly light by modern standards. Direct, nervous at the limit in that particular rear engine way, where the back of the car is always reminding you it's heavier than the front, and it has opinions about how this corner should go. You drove them in conversation with the car rather than in control of it, and the distinction mattered. Then came the Carrera RS 2.7, 1973, a homologation special built to satisfy racing regulations that Porsche turned, almost accidentally, into one of the most coveted road cars ever made. Ducktail, spoiler, stripped interior, engine bored out to squeeze every honest horsepower from an architecture that was already proving it had more to give than anyone initially understood. It weighed 900 kilograms. It did things no car that light and that analog should have been able to do. And it did them with a precision that felt less like engineering and more like choreography. Enthusiasts who drove it in period remember it as a revelation. Enthusiasts who drive it now describe the same thing. Some cars date. The RS 2.7 only deepens. The 1970s brought the turbocharged 930, the Widowmaker, and with it, a whole new chapter in the 911's mythology. Turbocharging was new enough in road cars that nobody fully understood how to use it. The lag was violent. The power, when it arrived all at once, like a door being kicked open. Drivers who treated it like a normal car often found themselves in hedges. Drivers who understood it, who learned to ask for the power before they needed it, who read the car's weight shifts and adjusted accordingly, found something extraordinary on the other side of that learning curve. The 930 was, in the truest sense, a car that required something of you. It didn't meet you where you were. You had to come to it. And that, precisely, is what people mean when they talk about drivers' cars. Not fast, not safe, not easy. Requiring. By the time the 964 arrived in 1989, the 911 had accumulated enough history to be something more than a sports car. It was a document. Every version a chapter in an argument that Porsche had been making for 25 years. That a car built on clear principles, pursued with discipline and without apology, would outlast everything designed to replace it. The 964 introduced coil springs and ABS and power steering modernizations that purists complained about, and that, in hindsight, made the car accessible to a wider range of drivers without diluting what the car fundamentally was. And then came the 993 in 1994, the last of the air-cooled line. Wider hips, multi-link rear suspension, an engine that had been refined over 30 years into something that felt less like a mechanism and more like a musical instrument. When Porsche switched to water cooling with the 996 inches 1997, it was the right engineering decision. The air-cooled engine had given everything it had. The next chapter required different tools, but something was lost. Not performance, not reliability, not any measurable specification. The sound was different. The sensation was different. The feeling of a living, breathing engine in your ear. Air-cooled engines run hotter, they expand and contract, they tick and breathe in ways water-cooled engines simply don't. That intimacy was gone, and people noticed, not right away, but over time, As the air-cooled cars receded into the past, what they had given drivers became clearer in its absence, which is where Singer vehicle design enters the story. Rob Dickinson founded Singer in 2009 out of something that can only be described as love, the kind that isn't reasonable, isn't practical, and doesn't require justification. He had driven air-cooled 911s for years. He understood them at a level that went beyond enthusiasm into something closer to reverence. And he arrived at a question that seemed straightforward but carried enormous implication. What would an air-cooled 911 be if you applied everything we know now to everything it already was? Not a restoration, not a replica, a reimagining. The Singer philosophy, stated plainly, is to take a donor 964, generation 911, and rebuild it from the ground up, not to original specification, but to an ideal. The ideal of what the car could have been, should have been, if budget and timeline and compromise had never been factored. The bodywork is carbon fiber, shaped by hand, following the original lines, with a fidelity that borders on obsessive, but departing where departure serves the car. The pinstripe details, the proportions made more perfect by fractions of an inch that only the eye registers, not the measuring tape. Every panel fitted to a tolerance that the original factory, working in the 60s and 70s, couldn't have achieved because the technology didn't exist. Inside, the leather is hand-stitched. The gauges are redesigned to be cleaner, more legible, more beautiful, not digital, not touchscreen, not connected to anything, just analog instruments doing exactly what analog instruments should do, giving you the information you need and nothing you don't. And the engine. Singer partnered with Williams Advanced Engineering, the Formula One people, to develop an air-cooled flat six that produces upwards of 500 horsepower while still breathing through carburetors, still sounding like nothing built in this century has any right to sound like. The decision to keep it air-cooled, to keep it carbureted, to preserve the sensory character of the original at the cost of ultimate performance numbers, that decision is the whole philosophy in miniature. Singer wasn't trying to win a spec sheet comparison. They were trying to preserve an experience. The cars Singer builds are not cheap. They start somewhere north of $500,000 and climb from there depending on specification. And the waiting list has at various points stretched to years. This is not a product. It is a commission. Each car is built for a specific owner, to a specific brief, as a singular object that will never be exactly replicated. And yet the demand has never wavered. If anything, it has grown. This tells you something important, not about wealth, not about the collector car market, but about what people are actually looking for when they commission one of these cars. They're not buying a faster 911. They're not buying a more comfortable one or a more technologically sophisticated one. They're buying back something they feel has been lost, or something they never had and always wanted. The air-cooled 911 occupies a unique position in automotive culture precisely because it represents a moment before everything became mediated, before the computers intervened between your inputs and the car's response, before the safety systems and the torque vectoring and the active everything that modern performance cars require to function at the limit. The old 911 put you in direct contact with the physics of the situation. No buffer, no interpretation. The road came through the steering wheel into your hands, and what you did with that information was entirely your problem. Singer restores that conversation at a level of craft the original never achieved, with a mechanical sophistication the original never had, but with the same fundamental honesty at its core: driver and machine, nothing in between. There is a concept in Japanese aesthetics called mono no aware, loosely translated as the pathos of thing, the bittersweet recognition of impermanence. The cherry blossoms are beautiful partly because they fall. The thing is precious partly because it will not last. The air-cooled 911 carries that quality in a way no current production car can. It belongs to an era that is genuinely over. The regulations that shaped it no longer exist. The engineering philosophy that produced it has been superseded. The factories that built it have long since moved on. You cannot have a new one. You can only have one that remains, or one that has been made new, again through the kind of painstaking devotion that Singer brings to the work. And that irreplaceability is not a flaw. It is precisely the point. The Retro 911 is beloved because it is honest in a way that very little is honest anymore. It doesn't pretend to be more comfortable than it is, or more forgiving, or more sophisticated. It tells you exactly what it is on the first drive and invites you to decide if you're ready for that conversation. Singer takes that honesty and elevates it into something that looks from the outside like perfection, and from the inside feels like the closest thing the modern world has produced to a time machine. Not because it takes you back, but because it reminds you of something you didn't know you'd forgotten. That the relationship between a driver and a machine can be something more than transportation. It can be something worth preserving, something worth building by hand, something worth waiting years for. There's no car like a Retro 911. Not because nothing else tries, but because nothing else started where it started, survived what it survived, and arrived still itself, still honest, still asking something of the person behind the wheel at exactly the moment when the world most needed to be reminded of what a car could be. If this is a rabbit hole you're just starting to fall down, welcome. Drop a comment with the first air-cooled 911 that made you stop scrolling. And subscribe if you want more on the cars, the craft, and the people obsessive enough to spend their lives in pursuit of getting it exactly right.